Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Kifa, for starting us off with the kind of helping us frame the conversation. And I think what I'm going to try to do is go from there and kind of build off of what he's talked about. When we think about marriage conflict, oftentimes there's a lot of emotion that's associated with this, right? And oftentimes it's negativity. And what we wanted to really be able to do is make sure that each opportunity, every conflict that happens by the will of Allah, right? And so with each conflict, there's an opportunity for us to grow and learn from it about ourselves and about our spouse. And so we want to kind of frame this conversation along that line. So we start off with recognizing the fact that every couple has conflict. It's just natural and it's just normal, right? And that most couples are looking for support. And when we think about it, you know, if every relationship, even if you're looking beyond the marriage, right? If you think about sibling relationships, relationship with your parents, there's always conflict. But the conflict between spouses is a little bit more high stakes, right? And so what I want to do, because I know it's the afternoon and after a nice meal, we get a little tired, we want to kind of have a little bit of interaction. And so if you could use your phones and either go to the web or text 22333 and enter Sameera Ahmed 180. And I'm going to ask you a couple questions. And I think the idea that we really want to do is normalize the fact that conflict happens. The conflict is not the issue. The issue is how you deal with it. So if you go to that space, I want you to ask, have you had a conflict with your spouse in the last month? Right? Yes or no? And so, back again? Okay. Oops. Sameera Ahmed 180. You first text 22333, and then you enter Sameera Ahmed 180. Got it? And so the question is, have you had a conflict with your spouse in the last 2 months? Okay? Yes or no? Right? So let's see. Ooh, 100%. Yes. There are a few of you have been very fortunate, alhamdulillah. But I'm guessing that if we were to move it to 6 months, we would all be able to say we've had a conflict. And so when we think about these things, and again, we all have it, the question is, what do you do with it? And so what we do at the FYI is we really focus on identifying the problems. Like, this is a problem that we know that we have, and what do we do with it, right? And so we then move to the questions. Once you identify the problem, we then look to researching what are the issues, what are the challenges, what needs to happen. And then we look towards solution seeking. Okay, we know the problem, this is the information, these are the solutions. And then we give that back to the community, right? By developing resources that can help you deal with these solutions. Yes, we know we all have conflict. Then what? Right? And so the organization that we do is really focused on finding solutions to the challenges that we as Muslim Americans face. Looking at our context, considering our faith, and integrating research and clinical evidence. Right? And so what we know from the research on Muslim Americans is that when we have issues, when we have conflicts, there are a few areas that we tend to fight over the most, right? Gender roles and responsibilities, mismatched expectations, issues with family and in-laws, having different interests, right? Not spending enough time with each other, religious differences, different attitudes towards sex, right? All of these are kind of the major issues that we in general struggle with. And what you'll find is you'll probably find that if you map out your conflicts, it's usually in those areas. Now, COVID has done a number on all of us, right? On top of all of that stress, what we find is 1 in 3 Americans are having increased stress, more than normal. And that's because there's so much uncertainty. I mean, many of you guys coming here today, you weren't even sure if you're gonna come, right? A few months ago, like, is this gonna happen? Is it not gonna happen? There is also, the support systems you might have utilized beforehand, the coping styles, like if you used to go to the gym to get rid of all your stress, if you used to hang out with your friends regularly, those coping kind of methods are no longer available for many of us, or things have changed so much. So that's another added layer of stress. The sheer length of COVID and the precautions and everything, that also has done a number on all of us. And then the prior issues that we may have already had has just gotten exasperated. So you have layer upon layer upon layer. And these challenges are the challenges that many of us are struggling with. Every person, 9 out of 10 people in this room are indicating that there has been a conflict. I mean, I know personally in the last few months, I've had a major conflict, right? It's normal. The thing is, what are you doing? What are the marriage problems you are struggling with? Are they any of these, or are there others? And so if you want to go back to the poll, again, what are the marriage problems you are struggling with? Just type in. Again, nobody can tell who it is. So if it's one of those issues, put it in. If it's something else, add it. So we have together time, finances, right? Responsibilities and expectations, equality, so that a lot of the gender expectations, mismatched communication, right? So a lot of what we know from the research, we're also seeing, right? So family time, respect, communication issues, and you see that of the numbers, of the different things, you have expectation and spending time with each other. These are the big things that we're all struggling with, right? So really think about, these are the problems that are causing the conflict. And so when we look at marriage conflict, we know that conflict is inevitable, right? How you address these issues, how you fight about it, that's what matters, not the fact that you have the conflict, right? That when you look at it as an opportunity to grow, to say, okay, something's going on here. What do we do about it? What are we going to learn from it? How are we going to understand each other? That attitude deepens the relationship, right? And so what we want to really focus on today is really addressing marital conflict. What do you do when you have it? So 5 main things that I want you guys to leave away with, and I'll go through a little bit by each. 1, immediately calm down, right? Because when you're upset, you're likely to do more damage. 2, recognize the pattern of marriage conflict that's going on between you and your spouse. 3, understand your response. 4, be open to understanding your spouse's response. 5, address it as a team. Okay? And as we talk about this, I do want to give a warning. When we're talking about conflict, we are not talking about saying okay to physical abuse, verbal abuse, financial abuse, spiritual abuse, sexual abuse. None of that is what we're talking about, right? If any of that is going on in your relationship, there's something else that needs to be done, right? And alhamdulillah, we do have an organization within the Muslim community, Peaceful Families Project. They specialize in domestic violence within the Muslim community. So I would recommend that if you are struggling with that, make sure you look at their resources and to help you recognize that this is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the everyday conflict. And we have, the FYI has a divorce support toolkit, and we'll have a session tomorrow, or on Tuesday, to really discuss about if you're in that situation, what to do. Okay, so calm down. We want to first start off with calming down, because oftentimes when we are in a heightened state of anger or frustration, we say things and do things that make the situation worse. So really thinking about what calms you down and having a toolbox to help you during that time period. Right? Because when you inflame the situation, it helps nobody. So really thinking, does nature help you? Going out and walking out in the cold. Going out and being with friends and family to kind of distract you and calm you down in that situation. Exercise, that's one of my things that I like to do. In our masjid, we have hockey. And I can't tell you how many marriages have probably been saved with our floor hockey every single Wednesday, because all the anger and frustration comes out, right? So really thinking about, making dua, really leaving it to Allah and asking Him for guidance. Nutrition, changing what you're eating. If you're all tense up, is it because of the level of caffeine you're taking? Really thinking of all of these different things that you can do. And what's really important is if what you're doing right now is not working, really think and learn from other people. So I'm going to ask you all to share what helps you calm down when you're stressed out. So again, same thing, write that down in the poll. Ice cream, yeah. Ice cream makes me feel good too. Love and getting attention and connection. Sleep is really important. Again, these are think of the ideas that you can add to your toolbox, right? And not everything's gonna work every single time, but you have to know that when you're upset, take a time out. Those of us with kids like to give our kids time out. What can you do for yourself? So take the time out, make sure you calm yourself down before you have any connection, any interaction with your spouse, right? And you guys have lots of great ideas. And take those ideas and use them, okay? Now the next thing, which you really want to do, is to start seeing the patterns in your relationship when you are having conflict. Now this is a little complex, and I'll walk you through. If you start from the arrow down where there's a trigger, right? That trigger is one thing that happens that gets you upset. So say, for example, your kids are fighting, and one of you guys get upset, right? You get triggered. So then you have an emotional reaction. Right? The emotional reaction results in a conversation. So the emotional action, maybe you're really annoyed, it's driving you crazy, you're upset. The inner dialogue is, why can't they get their act together? Why do I always have to be the one who's stopping the fight? Why does blah, 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 and you go off. Well, if you're all upset, what's going to happen with your behavior, right? You're going to be really upset. Either you say something to the kids, you say something to your spouse, and it may start another fight. Now, when you do that, your spouse has possible things that you could do. It could trigger him or her, or it may not have an effect on them. Now, if it triggers him or her, they have a similar emotional reaction, an inner dialogue, and they also have a behavioral reaction where getting upset, yelling at people, doing something whatever. And so you have this ongoing infinity circle that until you break it, it's going to continue on, right? And what's really important to recognize in this cycle, it starts off with insecurities that we may have, right? And it kind of gets to that need that we have to connect with our spouse. So we have the trigger because there is that vulnerability. Once we have the trigger, if we can't get out of this cycle, and we can't connect to our spouse, that vulnerability within our relationship is what's getting impacted, right? And so now when we take this pattern and you break it down from each person's perspective, and I'm going to give you an example. Say, for example, you came back, you just had the COVID booster, right? And you're not feeling great. You're upset, and you're tired, and you're exhausted. So already you're vulnerable physically. And then you see the dishes in the sink. And, well, I'll just play the example of me as a wife. I might see those dishes in the sink, and I might be what? I'm sick. Can't you just do the dishes? I don't get it. Do I not matter? So that vulnerability that I may have, that insecurity, may be that I don't matter, right? And so when I see that when I feel like I don't matter, the emotions, and we talked about the emotional reaction, may be feeling sad and hurt and lonely. Sad because, why can't it just get done? Why do I always have to do it? Hurt that you feel like the whole responsibility is on you. And the loneliness is feeling am I the only person in this relationship? Why am I doing everything? That emotional burden, right? That results in fatigue and tension, physical tension. right? And so I may react by being quiet in the relationship, withdrawing, sulking, or I may finally erupt and yell, right? And this whole time I might be thinking, well, if he truly loved me, he would do it. No one knows what's going on in our minds except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And yet we expect our spouse to always know. And so if you recognize this cycle is happening with us, recognize the same cycle may be happening with our spouse, right? So when we look at that, we look the same situation. Now, say for example, I just told you all this. Now, same thing, I get upset, and the dishes are still in the sink. That's what's triggered this whole thing. And if I'm getting upset at my spouse, my husband, and he's feeling like, well, I've kept the kids okay, they're alive, and they're getting all this stuff done, and everyone's fed, and just because the dishes aren't done, you're all upset? Now, if he's struggling with feelings of inadequacy, that's going to get triggered, right? And then in terms of feelings and emotions, he's feeling angry, like, wow, like I've done all this and she didn't even see this. She focused on the 2 things that I didn't get done, but missed the whole 8 things that I did, right? And then kind of feeling, again, the same thing, feeling sad, hurt, and lonely, like no matter what I do, it's not good enough. And then it kind of goes to the thought of, well, will anything I ever do be good enough? Will she ever appreciate me? I do all of these other things, right? Do you see how the anger and loneliness starts to build? And then he gets defensive, right? And it gets defensive and starts to give up and withdraw as well. And like, I've done everything, why can't you just be happy with me? And you see the same dishes, simple dishes. It's triggering, again, the same thing. Both people are understanding the dishes, but they're having a different trigger and it having a different impact. Insecurity for one is I'm inadequate. Insecurity for the other is I don't matter. And that's where the challenge happens. And both really want to connect to the other. Right? It's not that they don't like the other, they don't care about the other, they're just feeling in a bad place. And so what you want to do is go to the next slide, and where you're able to see yourself, let me actually go back, to see yourself outside of this kind of infinity circle and recognize, okay, this is a pattern that's going on. In order to get out of this pattern, I need to step out and see us as a team. And as we see each other as a team, how do we work together to address those issues, those insecurities that we have, right? And so we talk about learning and growing as a team to see ourselves, right? And this, a lot of the topic that we talked about here, where when we're talking about the rahma and nasiha and muadda and sakina and muhasaba, these are all some of the things the Sheikh earlier talked about, but really thinking about what does that look like in a relationship? Are we open to hear the other person and to learn how are they seeing the same situation that I'm so emotionally charged with, right? And are you focusing on what you can control, right? And so again, we ran through and sprinted through some of the topics, but we can go through these topics in much more detail. The FYI, like I mentioned, really focuses on getting these resources to you and helping you address these issues. We have 4 different workshops, that are anywhere from 2 to 4 hour workshops that really goes into these issues in greater depth. And so I encourage you, I think there's a QR code that is being passed around, so do please make sure to take from there. We also have marriage videos that you can use on, again, this is free, available online at thefyi.org. And also realize that sometimes some of this work is not going to be enough, kind of the self-help work. You need a marriage therapist. And so we do have the therapy guide, again, online for free that you can just download and guide you trying to find who is trained and is a professional and how do you find if there's a good fit. Because you don't want to wait till things have gotten really bad. When you start off initially, we highly recommend pre-marriage counseling, pre-marriage education. We have an online program for those of you that we have information about. And we also recommend, in addition to that, if the kind of the pre-marriage work and the marriage therapy help is not enough, to really do additional deeper work. And so you can get many of these resources if you scan this QR code. I believe the QR code is being passed around. And you can find a lot of these resources on our website, and you can follow us on at thefyi.org. Jazakallahu khair.